Hello everybody, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to cover stops. If you haven't already, please do press the subscribe button and click the bell icon. The bell icon helps you out because it gives you notification every single time I upload a video. I upload a video every week and sometimes more than that if I feel like it. In this video at the very end, I'm going to share with you a surprise which is going to happen tomorrow. So if you're watching this any later than the day that this went out, then you might have missed the surprise, but you know, stick with us until the end anyway. So first of all, let's start right out to the beginning. What is a stop? Well, if you have watched the exposure triangle video, which I will link above, that video will talk you through the 3 points of the exposure triangle, which include aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Now, a stop is a photographic measurement of light, and to be honest, I don't actually know where it came from. I feel like somebody just made it up, but essentially when we are using Lightroom, for example, and you increase your exposure to plus 1.00, that is adding one stop of light. So stops kind of basically just come back around to exposure, and knowing what a stop is will help you out, because somebody can look at a picture and say, you know, you could have done with an extra stop of light, or this is one stop overexposed, or a half stop, or whatever it might be. So essentially the reason why I personally believe it's a really good thing to know is if you're in Lightroom or Photoshop, whatever it might be, and you're cranking up the exposure in your images most of the time, and you're hitting, you know, plus 0.50 or plus 1.00 on your exposure line, that means that you are continually underexposing by at least half a stop or one stop. So just being aware of the fact of what you're doing on a regular basis can help you out in terms of things like you might need to change your monitor brightness, you might need to alter your settings for the next session. And what I found it really useful for is when I first got this Sony camera, which was a couple of months ago now, I went out and shot and everything was coming out really, well, it looked fine on the camera, but back in Lightroom, it was all quite heavily underexposed. And I've got one of those images up on the screen at the moment, so I can show you what I mean. But first of all, I want to just cover off how to get a stop. So stops kind of work in doubles, for lack of a better explanation. So if your shutter speed is say 1/200th of a second, and obviously increasing your shutter speed reduces the level of light, right? So if you double your shutter speed, as in double the number after it, so you've gone from 1/200th of a second to 1/400th of a second, you've removed one stop of light. And the same works backwards too. So if you're at 1/1000th of a second and you need a stop of light, if you half your shutter speed, you will get one stop of light back. Are you with me? So the same thing works for ISO as well. So if you're at ISO 1000 and there's not enough light, you can add one stop of light by just doubling your ISO. I'm really hoping all of this is making sense, but we will go through it in a little bit more detail. The next thing I want to do is I want to shake you in and show you this picture. So on my screen at the moment, you guys will be able to see a straight out of camera image of Alf. As you can see, it's horrifically exposed. This is so bad, and there's no adjustments on this at all. If you look at the histogram, you know, up here we are 100% in the black, so we've got black clipping all over the shop. It is not good. I was at ISO 3200, which is ridiculous, and my other settings were crap. I mean, what was I doing here? But yeah, I just shot some action and was just not thinking very well. I mean, it happens to all of us, guys. Don't worry about it. So how do I know when I've got the right exposure right? So I want to know how many stops underexposed I was at this location. So if I grab my exposure and lift it, let's turn off the clipping, lift it until I think, you know, the exposure's right. So I'm thinking maybe about there. If we were to do, you know, so, oh, okay, we can come back a little bit more then. So about here. So as you can see here on the exposure slider, the exposure is moved now up to plus 2.55, which is 2.5 stops. So to get this exposure under that light at this time of day in that location, and having everything the same, I would need to win back 2.55 stops of light. So this is a really good exercise because we can work out what we need to do. Obviously, there is just no point even editing this. It's just not worth it at all. So all of the images from this session just kind of got binned off, if I'm being honest with you. And I wanted to work out using maths, because I'm really bad at maths, but using actual maths, I wanted to work out what settings I would actually need to go back to this location at that time in that light and be able to get a good exposure. So what we can do is look at the settings that were taken on the actual day and work backwards. So for this, guys, we're going to move away from the Mac just for a sec and grab hold of an iPad and an Apple Pencil, which I'm hoping has got enough charge to just run through this exercise. Let's just note down the settings that we had. So we were on ISO 3200. We were at 2.8 on our F number. Okay, that was really messy. Let's write that again. 2.8, sorry guys, left-handed, doctor's writing. And we were at 1,250th of a second, which for a portrait is just stupid. So I can't gloss it up. I mean, that's the truth. So we need to gain 2.5 stops or thereabouts. So this is our aim of where we need to get to. So there is a few different ways of doing this. First thing to note is that I'm on a 2.8 lens, so I can't actually go any lower than 2.8. So my aperture in this situation is fixed. Now, obviously, if you had a 1.4 lens, for example, I don't know, what's a 1.4? Is 105 a 1.4? There'd be 50mm 1.4s. That would get you your extra stop of light from there, but we can't do that here today. So what are we gonna do? We're just gonna have to work it out. So, first thing that I am aware of is the fact that that ISO is very high and also makes me a bit nervous. So I'm going to focus just specifically on my shutter speed here. Now, because I'm absolutely shocking at maths and this is recorded, I'm just going to grab a calculator. We have a calculator because that's good. So to get to, let's just focus on one stop. So if we put in 1,250, divide that by 2. Right, because shutter speed, so you're dividing it by 2. So if we can get one stop by going to let's round down, 600th of a second, okay? So that is one stop, okay? So what about if we go again? So if we divide 600 by 2, I don't need a calculator for that, but that takes us to 1/300th of a second, right? So we're now 2 stops. So we're really close right now to our 2.5 stops here. And I just want to think, can I get an extra stop? Because you'll see why in a second. So what about if I divide that by 2? So if I go right down to 1/150th of a second, I'm on a 200mm lens, but the lens has got image stabilization. So because it has image stabilization, it means I can go lower than the safe zone if I'm being careful, which I would be. So for this situation, I'm quite happy to go to 1/150th of a second, which takes us to 3 stops. So now we've actually overexposed this scene in this situation, in this lighting, at that time of day. We've now slightly overexposed this scene. Now I'm wondering actually if I can, from that 2.5 stops here, I know that I can reclaim a stop of light pretty safely with my equipment and with my editing. So I know that I could probably give up at least that half of a stop, if not slightly more. So what if we then looked at halving our ISO? Because then that would make it more safe, right? Because 3,200 for a portrait is quite high. So 3,200 divided by 2 is 1,600, which is a pretty good ISO. So now we've kind of lost a stop here. So we've lost 1 stop. So we're back to 2 stops of light gained by being at ISO 1,600. Okay, so we're at 2 stops now. I know I can safely pull back 1 stop, so I can get half a stop more and be safe. So the easiest way to find half a stop is to actually take half of whatever number you've got. So 1,600, take half of that, so divide that by 2 is 800. You want to then take half of that and add it onto it. So 800 would, then half of that is 400, correct? So then you would add 400 to 800, okay? So plus 400 takes us to ISO 1200, or the closest derivative thereof. Now I know also, just because of where this location was, I know I went when it was actually really quite dark. It was gone 8 p.m. I think on the evening. So I know if I went slightly earlier than that, I would probably get a little bit more light. So I could probably just about squeeze that down to ISO 1000, which would leave our final settings as ISO 1000, f2.8, because we can't go lower than that, and 1/150th of a second, which would be perfect. And so that's what I did. And so I went back, let me see if I can find the picture of when we actually went back. So if you look at this image here, we were at ISO 1000, we were at f2.8, and we were at 1/125th of a second, so slightly lower than that, just because I just wanted that extra reach. And if you look, the exposure on this image is actually pretty damn perfect. And we can go in and, you know, lift all of the shadows up. We can lift pull all the highlights down. Nothing is clipped, nothing is blown out. Everything is perfect. So this is the thing, guys. If you know how to work your stops, you can go out and shoot, and either at the time assess the situation and do some maths, or you can come back in afterwards and just look through. So this is a really good exercise. I think it's 100% worth doing on your photographs. And also, if you are in a situation where you've used maybe really high ISO and you're thinking, you know, if I went back there, do I have to use the same ISO? And you can just work out, see if you can pull that light from any of the other settings. Of course, on the day the light can be different, but it is worthwhile looking at. I promised you guys a surprise at the end of this video, and the surprise is basically that I'm opening up the workshop bookings tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So this is very exciting. Keep an eye out on social media. It will be on stories first. So it'll be on Instagram stories first, which also then pulls through to Facebook stories, but just keep an eye on the stories first. Immediately after it goes out on stories, it will also go out on as a Facebook post into the main page and then into the group. Before that happens, at the exact same time that the stories happen, an email will go out with all of the relevant links to you guys on the email list, which you can get to by heading to the blog, which is linked in the description below. Our Instagram is also linked in the description below, so make sure you give it a follow, and the Facebook group is also linked in the description below. Everything's in the description below. That's everything. If you haven't already, please do press the subscribe button and click the bell icon. The bell icon helps you out because it gives you a notification every single time I upload a video, which is just really nice. You know, if you get anything from this channel, please let me know either in the comments or on social media, and I will see you all again very, very soon.